Hello everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to Cinefessions, where we talk all things media. So I am here today with another 4K review, and this time we are talking about the brand new release of Saw on 4K. So this is a movie that I remember owning in virtually every format that it's been released in. I actually, for whatever reason, I missed this in theaters somehow, which is so weird to me thinking back because I saw so many movies in theaters in 2004 when this film came out. So I don't know how I missed this one, but I did. I remember my uncle actually giving me a pirated DVD of this movie before the actual DVD came out. We watched it at my buddy's house in his parents' basement. They had a home theater. We watched it there, and I was just blown away by what I saw. Like, it changed my horror watching life, to say the least. Like, it was amazing. And then, of course, I owned like the special edition DVD when that came out. I owned the Blu-ray, the complete set here. I'm sure I owned the original Blu-ray as well, but I also have the complete movie collection. This one is actually the older one because it doesn't have Jigsaw. This is 1 through 7. But now, of course, I had to pick up the 4K release, and I did go whole hog and grab the Steelbook for this. So I am super excited to talk about one of my favorite horror movies. So we're going to do a little unboxing. We'll talk about the film itself a little bit, and then we'll talk the audio and visual quality to see if this is worth the upgrade to 4K or if the Blu-ray is sufficient. So let's not waste any more time at all. Let's dive right into my review of Saw on 4K. I'll admit, I really like the slipcover edition of this. I think it is a beautiful edition as well, but because the price was so low, it was only like $2 more or $3 more to get the Steelbook, I decided to go that route. So this is a Best Buy exclusive Steelbook, and it does come with a slipcover, which I love, so that's cool. So you can take a look here on the back. You can see some of the special features if you're interested in that, which I will talk about them a little bit later. But yeah, this is what the whatever this is, the slipcover looks like. I love when the Steelbooks come with the slipcover. I think that is just awesome. So then you have the Steelbook itself, which looks awesome. The black eye, you can kind of see there, is a little shiny, where the rest of it is matte finish. But that is, you know, just that infamous puppet there. And then the back of it is really what sold me on this thing. So it has Cary Elwes's character, and then Jigsaw behind him. Like, that is just a beautiful Steelbook. So I wanted to go ahead and get that. And then taking a look on the inside, you do have some art on the 4K disc, a little bit on the Blu-ray as well. This does come with a digital code as well, if you're interested in that. But let me get the discs out of the way here so I can show you guys, because there is actually some art on the inside. You have the Saw itself and then the foot. So, very iconic items, iconic images from this movie. So that is the Steelbook. I'm happy with it. I do really like the slipcover edition as well, but I think this one looked too cool to pass up. And I should mention, like, all the Saw films are always so cheap to buy. This complete collection with actually all 8 of them, so not even this one, the one that came out after this, is only like $13.50 on Amazon right now. Like, it is always so cheap. It's one of the cheaper complete horror series you can find on Blu-ray. This one was only $18.99 when I picked it up on Steelbook from Best Buy. The slipcover edition, I believe, is like $16 right now. I saw a tweet about Amazon's price, and it's only like $14.50 right now. So if you're watching this around when this released, then you can probably pick it up for relatively cheap, definitely under $20. So for whatever reason, these movies always sell super cheaply. So that's good for us, good for me. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, this Steelbook looks great. So that is why I decided to go the Steelbook route this time around, and that's what it looks like. So yeah, now let's talk about the movie itself. If you're watching this channel, I'm sure you already know what Saw is. It is an iconic horror franchise at this point, but the original here, we are being introduced to Jigsaw, who is this serial killer who likes to put people in these games. So he tries to find people that are not appreciating life as much as he thinks that they should. And so he puts them into these games. Basically, they are like torture traps of sorts, and he makes them try to fight their way out. Now, the idea is that every one of these these games that he plays does have a way for the person to get out if they are willing to usually do pretty terrible things. And so we are specifically following our two main characters played by Leigh Whannell, who of course is a writer along with the star of this one, and Cary Elwes from The Princess Bride is probably his most famous role. And so they are trapped in a bathroom at the start here, and then we're trying to figure out how they got there and how they're going to get out. So that's kind of the general gist of this one. It is part of that torture genre, which was super popular at this point. Hostel, things like that were what really made the torture genre very popular. And the fact that they were able to do this on such a small budget, but yet make so much money off of it, is why these were around for quite some time. Now, the torture genre didn't last that long, but this was definitely one of the grandfathers of that genre. And I think why I like that genre so much is just because of the era it came out. Like, that was when I was in high school. I graduated in 2004. You had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I would fit into that genre as well, that subgenre, I guess. And I absolutely love it. That's one of my favorite movies. That's why I will always give remakes a chance, because that movie was so good. And that's where you had the reboot era as well, kind of along these same lines. And a lot of those reboots or, reimaginations, whatever you want to call them, they did fall into that torture genre, much like Last House on the Left. The list goes on and on. But Saw was always one of my favorites. Like I mentioned at the start, this one just blew me away when I first saw it. Now, I'm not going to talk any spoilers just in case you haven't seen this one yet. But at this point, a lot of people know that what makes this movie is really kind of the end and what happens at the end, because you just don't see it coming. At least I never did. And so when that finale hits, it's just shocking. At least it was the very first time I saw it. Now, the problem with that is that on repeat viewings, the movie does lose a little bit of its luster because you already know what's going to happen. And when you predicate your movie on that twist at the end so much, like, it just makes it a little more difficult for those rewatches. Now, that said, there is still a ton to like here. Like, I think that, so I always hear this movie get ragged on for the acting, specifically Cary Elwes' character. But to be fair, I think that both him and Leigh Whannell do a really good job with what they're given. This is a really difficult role. These two roles are really difficult to portray, especially, I'm sure they didn't have a lot of prep time. This is a very low budget film. Like, I'm sure they don't have their own like trailers where they can spend time prepping for this and, months of trying to get into the psyche of these characters. They were doing the best with what they were given, I'm sure. And I think one of the reasons that I always found Cary Elwes' performance not bad by any stretch, but less than perfect, I think, is it was very evident to me that he was trying to hide his accent. And sometimes that really grates on me. Other times I don't really notice or care. But this is one of those times where I notice his accent and that he's trying to hide it. And I think it gives his character a certain air that just makes the acting feel a little bit lesser than it potentially could. But again, for what they're doing, the emotional roller coaster that these two actors are forced to, endure is pretty darn good, especially given the genre and given the budget of this film. It is so very obvious to me why James Wan and Leigh Whannell went on to these mega careers at this point. James Wan and Leigh Whannell wrote the story together. They wrote the script together, and Whannell obviously starred in it, and James Wan directed it. Now, they were both friends in college. They wanted to make a movie. Wan wanted to direct. Whannell wanted to star, so they figured they would just make their own and do it that way. So that's what happened with this one. So that's why it was, such a small budgeted film. But what they're able to do with that budget is pretty darn remarkable. So what really stands out to me is James Wan's camera work. There are some scenes, specifically with like the bear trap scene, I guess I'll call it, where we get Amanda for the first time, who of course will, be a player in the future movies from this. But the way the camera moves around is done really well. It's just spinning around the character, but it does it in an interesting way. It keeps it unique, especially from when this film came out. It goes into like fast forward essentially as it wraps around. It speeds up time and it looks really cool. It creates this awesome atmosphere that I think is present throughout the entire film. Wan's use of color is amazing as well. Like the green tint in that scene is awesome. There's another scene where a character is forced to have this flammable liquid on him and he's carrying a candle around him. Just how that plays out. Again, just the use of motion in this I think is done really well, along with that mixture of color. It just makes for a memorable memorable film, and it does a lot to hide some of the like budget restraints that they may have had. That dark, gloomy, gritty, grainy film, it really helps hide a lot of that. So I think it works to their benefit, but it still comes off as it feels unique, and it feels just, I don't know, different and special. So I think that's what makes this movie stand out to me, even after all of these years, after all of these sequels, which I know tend to get more and more ridiculous as the series goes on. A little plug here, if you want to hear my full thoughts on the entire series, we did do a Cinefessions podcast arc on all of the movies. So those are all spoiler-filled podcasts, just FYI, but we kind of go scene by scene through those. So I have talked about this movie at length in my life. So, but I never tire of it because it is such a fun movie. One thing that I feel like gets lost in this film is the fact that this is a relatively tame movie, especially when you compare it to the rest of the series. So, of course, this is part of the torture genre, but it's like one of the earlier ones. And so it doesn't have all of the crazy on-screen gore that you might expect or that you might think you remember from it. A lot of it is done just off camera. It is implied, and there's a lot of blood splatter, but like you're not going to see like an Achilles get cut like you do in the Hostel franchise. Like you're just not going to see those things done on screen. Yes, there are some cuts of a blade into an ankle at one point, but there's only like 2 or 3 seconds of that. It's very short, and it's not super brutal. So the fact that this one is just, every time I watch it, I'm surprised by the fact that it's not as brutal, not as gory. It is bloody, but it's not as gory as I remember it being, especially for a film from this time. Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is infinitely bloodier and gorier than this movie. So now, of course, again, we're talking because of the budget constraints. They could only do so much, but what they do here is imply a lot of that gore, and it sticks with you because I'm guessing you remember this. If you haven't seen this recently, I'm guessing you remember it being a pretty bloody, gory film. So in reality, it's just done, a lot of it's done off screen. So I think that's one of the other remarkable things about what Wan is able to do with this on such a low budget and make it still so memorable, which is why he went on to have this gigantic career now. So Saw will always go down as just one of my favorite horror films because it was just so remarkable, so game-changing when it came out. I will never forget the first time I watched this movie in my buddy's basement in his home theater and just being absolutely blown away by it. So though this film is not perfect, and I recognize that on each repeat viewing, and once you've seen it once, it doesn't quite have that same impact as it did the first time, I still really enjoy this movie, and I'll never tire of it. So I am giving Saw from 2004 4 out of 5 stars. So now let's talk about the audio quality on this 4K release specifically, and they actually went ahead and did a Dolby Atmos track for this, which is pretty remarkable. Just the idea that Saw has a Dolby Atmos track now is really cool. So I think the previous Blu-ray releases only had like the 5.1. This does have the Dolby Atmos, so that is an upgrade there. And at the beginning, when he's underwater, you should be able to feel a little bit of those heights. It is definitely encompassing the viewer, which is really good. But to be honest, I didn't really hear those heights as much as I did in something like Godzilla or something like that, because that's not what this movie is. This is a quieter horror film. The scarier moments are done in silence. And so because of that, I don't know if it's, it's not a Dolby Atmos track that you're going to use to showcase your system by any stretch of the imagination. But I think the voices were mixed well. I never lost any of the dialogue. I will say the sound effects were a little bit louder than the dialogue. I had to turn it down a little bit, but I never lost that dialogue even after turning it down a bit. The heights, that's not really what this movie's about, but there are some sound effects that are used within the heights, so that's something to look out for if you're really looking for heights in this film with your Dolby Atmos setup. But I think it does do a really good job bringing in this Dolby Atmos soundtrack, so kudos to them for putting this on here. I think that's really cool. So I'm going to give the audio quality on the Saw 4K disc 4 out of 5 stars. Now moving over to the visual side of the disc, not only do they have a Dolby Atmos soundtrack, but they also have Dolby Vision in here for those that are capable of using it on their system. And I gotta say, this is an interesting use of Dolby Vision, I guess, because this is a dark film. It is intentionally gritty and grainy. So you are going to get some of that film grain. And I know that's kind of a controversial topic. Some people really dislike it. Others love it. And for me, the only time where I thought film grain was a bit too much was in the Scream Factory release of Dawn of the Dead from '04. That one was a little much. It was a little bit distracting. It's never distracting on this release here. So that's a positive to me. I like that it's there because it's supposed to be there. But aside from that, so you are going to have just a gritty, dark film. So you're not going to get the typical film pop that you would with that Dolby Vision upgrade, like you would with something with like Trolls World Tour or something like that, where there are all these colors that can pop. So instead, what you're getting are improved blacks and just kind of better skin tones, things like that. So the biggest noticeable thing I would say is that this is just a cleaner picture than it is on the Blu-ray release. I did go back and forth on them. I watched, the 4K release, then I watched some of the Blu-ray just to see if I could notice a difference at all. And the Blu-ray is a bit, I don't know what it's just dirtier. The image isn't as cleaned up as it is here. Now, there is still film grain, but it doesn't make the image look dirty. It just makes you just see the film grain. So, I think this is a notable upgrade for that alone, because I know a lot of people always complained about the image quality on the old Blu-rays. So I didn't actually go back and watch like this Blu-ray of it, which I know has a compressed audio and visual quality because there are 2 movies on each disc. But watching the Blu-ray that came with this, I still noticed a difference. The biggest spot where you can see the difference, or that I could see the difference, was with Lee Winnell's character, his blue shirt. In the Blu-ray, it's faded. It almost looks white at points. There's sweat stains on it, but they don't stand out. Whereas in the 4K release, that blue shirt looks blue. It is a powder blue, I guess, but the sweat stains kind of stand out from that. So you just get more detail in this image, and it is noticeable if you're looking for it. There is one scene in this, and it is when we are learning how Lee Winnell's character was brought to this room, and so I'll leave it at that. But there's a closet that opens, and never before did I notice the thing in the closet, I guess I'll say, to try to keep it as spoiler free as possible. But in the 4K release, you can see it almost clearly. The red outline, almost the entire face of this as well. And then obviously the flash happens, and that's when we're supposed to actually see this, and it's a jump scare, of course. And so with the Blu-ray, with this Blu-ray at least, you do see it a little bit, but it almost just looks like a coat hanging in the closet. Whereas on the 4K disc, it's like, oh, that's a person. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Now, I didn't see this in theaters again, so I don't know if that's how it was originally when in theaters or not, but at least on every version I've seen, the DVDs and the Blu-rays previously, I never noticed that before. And so I thought that was interesting. It kind of almost ruins one of the jump scares there. At least for me, it did. And so that's something to keep in mind. You definitely are getting more detail. There are going to be scenes of darkness where you don't get a ton of that detail, but that happens to be one of those where it really stands out and kind of changes the dynamic of that scene just a little bit. So while admittedly this is not the best visual upgrade I've ever seen, I do think it is notable, and if you are a Saw fanatic, you will likely appreciate the upgrade that you're getting here, because you're simply getting a cleaner image. You will be able to see more of what's going on in these scenes, which I think is important if you are a big fan of this film. So I am going to give the visual upgrade on Saw 3.5 out of 5 stars. I do want to mention the special features before I give you my final thoughts on this. So on the 4K disc, there is an audio commentary track, but there's also a documentary called Game Changer: The Legacy of Saw. So this is a 77-minute documentary about the Saw franchise. I did not have time to watch this one yet, but I've heard really good things about it. It's supposed to cover the entire franchise with a lot of emphasis placed on the first entry. So if you are a fanatic of this, like I am, I will definitely be going back to watch this. I will mention this is not only available on the 4K disc, but also the Blu-ray disc, much like the commentary. So every special feature on the 4K disc is also on the Blu-ray. Now on the Blu-ray, they do add a couple additional special features. As you can see here, the original short film that this entire franchise is based off of is included, and that's pretty interesting to watch. It's only 9 minutes, but I definitely recommend that. And then there is the original documentary about this, or behind the scenes documentary. if I can find the name, Hacking Away at Saw. That's what it is. So that's the one. I think it was on the original. I know it was on the original special edition DVD, and then it was, you know, transferred to a lot of the Blu-ray releases from there. So you are not getting any new special features, but in my research, I believe that this might be the first time that Game Changer, that 77-minute documentary, it might be the first time that's actually on disc, because that was originally available through iTunes as like a special feature when you bought the movie. So please correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments below, but that might be the first time you're getting that Game Changer documentary on disc. So that's notable by itself. So is Saw 4K worth the upgrade or not? Well, for me, I'm happy I did it because, like I mentioned, the Dolby Atmos soundtrack mixed with that Dolby Vision does make for a better viewing experience. Now, it's not 10 times better by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think you just get more visual detail. You feel a little bit more immersed with that Atmos track than you did previously. So I'm happy I added this one to my collection. And the fact that it's so cheap, I think it's definitely worth adding to your collection. So I am going to give Saw on 4K 4 out of 5 stars. All right, so those are my thoughts on the 4K release of Saw. Let me know down in the comments below if this is one that you're planning to upgrade or if the Blu-ray is sufficient enough for you. If you are upgrading it though, are you going to go with the Steelbook edition or are you going to go with the slipcover edition? I would love to know which one is kind of the favorite amongst the community down in those comments below, so please leave those comments down there. As always, if you guys did enjoy this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to Cinefessions here on YouTube. I don't just talk movies either. I talk all things media, be it books, movies, video games, manga, graphic novels. If it's media related, I'm interested in it, and if you are too, you might consider subscribing. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today. I just want to say thank you all so much for watching, and I want to encourage you to consume some media today. I'll catch you next time.